Good morning. This is episode 10 of Talkin' Tunes with Dr. Tony. I hope everyone is doing well. This is another special edition. So in this video, we're going to be taking a deep dive into what is arguably Frank Zappa's magnum opus, or it could be considered to be a chaotic mess, depending on who you speak to. But before we get into that album, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the first 10 Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention's recordings, which I consider to be his classic period, and they range from 1966 to 1970. So there's 10 albums, and the first one, and 9 of the 10 were done with the Mothers, or actually 8 of the 10. The first one was Lumpy Gravy from 1966. And then in 1967, the Mothers released Absolutely Free. After that, in 1968, there were 3 albums released. The first one was We're Only in It for the Money, I believe. Then, hang on a second, I'm going to check my list here. Make sure I got this right. Yeah, We're Only in It for the Money, 1968. And then Lumpy Gravy came out, which is technically a Frank Zappa solo album, but still it's in the mode of the albums that he was doing in that time. A lot of it is instrumental. Then we had Cruising with Reuben and the Jets, 1968 as well, which was a series of doo-wop type songs. After that came Uncle Meat in 1969, which was actually recorded in 1967 and 1968. Then we had Hot Rats, which is a Frank Zappa solo album from 1969. And after that, there were 3 albums released in 1970. There was Burnt Weenie Sandwich. Then that was followed up by Weasels Ripped My Flesh. And then we have Chunga's Revenge. So I think that's a total of 10. So today, we're going to be doing a deep dive into the 5th album released under the Mothers of Invention name, but technically it could be Frank Zappa's 6th album if you want to put Lumpy Gravy in there. And the album we're going to be doing today is Uncle Meat. Uncle Meat. So what I did is I recruited a fellow YouTuber. His channel is called Shaggy the Opinionated Hippie, and Shaggy is an amazing person. He has created a video for every single Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention's albums that were released, all 125 of them on his channel, and he's done 63 of the albums that were recorded before Frank died, and then 62 that were released after that. He's also done a review of every Frank Zappa concert tour, and he's even gone so far as to identify the different drummers who have played with Frank, guitar players, and other people on their instruments. So it's a privilege to have Shaggy join us for our discussion of Uncle Meat. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and stop our introduction. And I hope everybody has a great day and that you enjoy the video. I'll talk with you later. Bye-bye. A deep dive and listen to it multiple times and have learned to appreciate it. So we've just been sharing some of our thoughts, and a lot of our thoughts I think are going to come out now, because what we're going to do is we're going to go through the 4 sides, and then after that we're going to talk about the album in general and maybe some related topics, but we've just been getting warmed up. So Shaggy, why don't you go ahead and kick it off and take us through side 1, and then Stan and I can chime in with a few comments once you're done.
All right. So I've said many times before that I think side 1 is maybe the most perfect side of Frank Zappa music. Maybe not the best songs overall, definitely not the best guitar playing overall, but I think as a statement from a musical artist, I think it is one of the most definitive statements that an artist has ever made. And I kind of came to this conclusion about 10 years ago. There was a release called Meet Light, which part of their Project Object series, which looked at like individual albums. So this one just looked at Uncle Meat. You get a much better mix, a remixed version of Uncle Meat that sounds more like the original than any of the pretty horrible CD remixes that came out from the 80s on. But you also get the original track listing that Frank had originally envisioned. And there's two differences. The biggest difference for me is all of side A. If you look at the way it is released now, or the way it's been released, since 68, 69, Sleeping in a Jar, a song with vocals, opens up side B, like very much like sets you up. Here's a little short little song. It's kind of silly. This is what's going to happen. Side C, the third side, opens up with Mr. Green Jeans, a song. Both of those open up with like vocals, something that is comfortable, something like somebody in 1969 is not going to be scared away from. The original version of Uncle Meat opened up with Dog Breath in the Year of the Plague. So you had a song, probably the catchiest song on here, some great vocals, like things that kind of reference a lot of different things that are going to pop up in the rest of the album. And it kind of gives you an entry into the album. And it's not like confrontational. It's not like challenging you. It's like, I'm giving you one of the best pop hooks on this album right from the beginning. He didn't go that way. He decided not to do that. He decided to bury that song as the fifth song on the track. And the first four songs are probably unlike anything I'd ever heard before in 1969, at least people who are not like actively searching out really strange, weird music. Opens up with Uncle Meat, little like what, semi-pseudo classical type jaunty little, like almost like a weird Jethro Tull on acid, like late period type, Irish piece, or some like, folklore-y, dated medieval type piece. But it's not that. It's also weird, and it's also trippy, and maybe because it's the 60s, it sounds good on drugs, but like, who knows? But it's the theme of the album, right? But it's like nothing. I challenge you to find me another piece of music like Uncle Meat on an album from like 69 or 68 or from this era in music, especially one that opens up an album. You get that, right? So you're already in 69, like, what is happening? The next track is the voice of Cheese. Then you get some really strange woman coming on talking about things you know nothing about. She's not explaining her references. It's just kind of weird, and maybe it's funny, and there's weird snorks that come in. You have no idea what's happening, and then that dissolves into drum solo or a drum session or something you might hear in the parking lot of a Grateful Dead show, like some post-show drum circle. And then through that winds a guitar solo that is, I don't know, it's like mixed, so it's not too prominent, but you can still hear it. It's really squirrely. It's sped up for some reason. It's on an acoustic guitar that's amplified, so we don't even get like a heavy, like psych guitar of like the late 60s. It doesn't sound like Hendrix, doesn't sound like anybody else. It's this really weird, overly indulgent 6-minute guitar drum jam. We haven't had a single song with vocals yet on the album. Then we get something called Zoller Zockel, which I don't even know how to pronounce because I've never heard anybody say it. More weird noise. And so what? We're like close to 10 minutes into the album. We're like 8 minutes into the album. Finally, you get Dog Breath. And it's almost like the sweetest piece of candy you've ever been offered at this point, because you have no idea where you are. You don't know why anything is happening. You don't understand the purpose of this album because you've already heard literally 4 completely different songs. And then you get this, and it's poppy and it's upbeat, and like there's great melodies. The background singers sound good. There's actual like a song that you can wrap your thoughts around. And then as that goes on, it sort of devolves into madness. It becomes like an Escher painting where like, here's Dog Breath, but like the last like 45 seconds, it's just, we're taking Dog Breath and like squeezing it and tweaking it and making it resemble nothing like it. Like it doesn't sound anything like that, but it's still the same song. Then we go into the Legend of the Golden Arches, which is essentially Pound for the Brown on the Bus. Another instrumental, kind of sounds like Uncle Meat. You get a little bit of Uncle Meat flavor in there. towards the end of that. So you're kind of also now tying back to that first song. So now you're like, okay, there's a purpose to this. None of this is random. He knew what he was doing. We're calling back to that opening track with this new track. But then we go to a live track from the Royal Albert Hall that just sounds not that good. Like it's like almost sounds like it's an audience tape, but he's playing Louie Louie, right? It's not even his own song, but he's playing it on the Royal Albert Hall pipe organ, which apparently is a big deal. Never been there, but I'm assuming it is, right? It's loud, it's crazy, it's confrontational. And then you get like 25 seconds or maybe 20 seconds of audience applause after that. And a track that is like 2.5 minutes long. So like 20% of that track is audience applause. And it feels like it's going to end. It feels like, okay, we've reached the end of side A, no idea what it's about, but no, then we get the dog breath variations. So we're revisiting the dog breath song. And yet it also feels like there's a little hint of Uncle Meat at the end of that thrown in just to tie in back to those other two songs. And all of a sudden it just kind of all makes sense. And you realize his intent, like this is not random. It's not a hodgepodge. There's nothing completely like, it's not a mixtape. It really is a purposeful statement from an artist about like, this is the music you have to like deal with. This is what I'm going to make. This is who I am as an artist. And I think it's just, it is so brave and it is so creative and it is so like nothing else that has ever been put out there. And if you can get through side A, and like I suggest anybody, if you're watching this and you've like never listened to Uncle Meat, listen to side A like 5 or 6 times before you go on to side B and side C, because it just prepares you for like the randomness that's coming, but you also need to pay attention because it's not random. There's going to be callbacks. There's going to be a melody that repeats itself. You know, like Pound for a Brown on the Bus, The Legend of Golden Arches pops up again later on. You know, you get Ian Underwood in the, you know, throwing out what is essentially a King Kong sax solo on like side 3, and then all of King Kong pops up on side 4. So again, it seems random, it seems chaotic, but it's all placed purposely for a reason. And I think side A, like unlike any other side of Zappa music, does that better than any other. And I think it's just a breathtaking piece of just 20th century art, essentially. And if that had been the only thing that was released, a 20-minute EP, and it was only side A, it'd probably still be my favorite album of Frank Zappa. It's a brilliant side of music.
So I have a question. So this album was, I think, completed recording in February of '68, but it didn't come out until March of '69. Do you have any idea why it was held up for so long?
I don't know. I do not know. I know Frank toured a lot. Like they went over to Europe in '68. So they did the whole German tour, which like Holiday in Berlin comes out of that, those lyrics. And then they did a lot of touring in '69. So it might have been Frank just trying to have enough money to actually finish the project, you know. But yeah, personally, I don't know why it took so long for it to come out. I'm sure it's in the liner notes of this thing, but I never read liner notes. I'm really bad about that. So I honestly don't know.
So I'm reading this book right now, The Electric Don Quixote, and it's talking about his first tour in London where they played Louie Louie on the pipe organ. So I thought this was pretty timely. It's also talking about where the Uncle Meat name came from.
Yeah.
Do you guys know that story? When he was at the Garrick Theater, that residency,
Oh yeah.
there was a character, a girl, and he named her Uncle Meat, and that was her persona for a while until she got tired of it. And she says, "I don't want to be called Uncle Meat anymore." So I guess that's where it came from. That pretty strange. The other thing I was telling Stan, I just watched the Zappa documentary again 2 nights ago, and I thought that was really good to tie into this. And I think it was either in there or the book, but when Pam, what's her last name? The Susie Cream Cheese, Pamela, whatever her name was, she went to back to her mother's. So anyway, Stan, you got some comments to make about side one?
So before Tony hit the record button, I mentioned that I'm a casual listener, but I did do some research, to get into the Uncle Mate thing, try and understand a few things. I read that this album, Uncle Meat, the release was delayed because they were trying to make an Uncle Meat movie. And I guess it never got released. I haven't seen it, I haven't heard about it. But that was that, and combined with money problems, just delayed things a little bit. So
Yeah, when they were
go ahead.
when they released the CD in the 80s, those are the penalty tracks that Tony's referring to. There's like 40 plus minutes of like excerpts from the Uncle Meat soundtrack. You don't get video, you just get the audio of it. And so they've always been called penalty tracks because I don't think anybody wants them there. So, but yeah, they were making a movie or trying to make a movie.
Okay. Good.
Dan, you got some more?
No, that's it. I agree though, generally with what Shaggy said. I mean, side one is kind of encapsulates the whole thing that Zappa was doing. It takes you everywhere. Dog Breath in the Year of the Plague is probably my favorite song on the album. But it's a nice oasis right there in the middle of all the chaos. Good side. Love that side.
So I have a couple things here. So at the 4-minute 20-second mark of 9 types of industrial pollution, The Torture Never Stops came to mind. The rhythm and the bass, real foreboding, plotting. So that may be something to check out. Again, that goes back to the Project Object, where there's this continuity. So here we are, if that is true, Zoot Allures came out 76, was it?
Sounds right.
Seven years after this, or actually, this was recorded 67, 68. So, and then I love on the Dog Breath, please hear my plea. Zappa says, please hear my plea. And then they go into the whole litany of stuff. I thought that was really cool. On The Legend of the Golden Arches, so it sounds like circus music, and then also it sounds like a soprano sax, where it's almost like a snake charmer sort of a sound coming out. But then I love it. Louie, he tells Don Preston, whip it on him, right? And then we got Ian Underwood, what is it called? Pulls it out or whips it out?
Whips
Whips it out.
Yeah.
And then we got Punky's whips. And then we got whipping post. So there's something about whip.
And on the original version, or the Meat Light version, there is a song called The Whip, which is a live guitar solo from, I think it's a King Kong. So yeah, he liked it even more.
So I thought those were pretty cool. And so Ruth Underwood makes her debut on this album, and I love xylophone. My mom used to clean this lady's house out in West LA when we were living in Bell, and this lady had a marimba in her playroom in the basement, and I was probably about 7 or 8 years old, and I would go there and just play that marimba. So that whole xylophone sound is really fantastic. I think that a lot of the sound effects and the snorts here you find those on We're Only In It For The Money as well. So that was a carryover from there. What else do I have that was pretty good? Anyway, so those are some of the thoughts that I had. And like I mentioned during our warm-up, on the vinyl copy I have, the times are wrong on the jacket, because I timed them with my stopwatch, and they're correct on the CD, but for some reason they were miscalculated, and I don't know what happened. But Zappa was not real happy with a lot of the production of the early albums. I think it was probably Freak Out, the inside of Freak Out. He hated the graphics on that. And because of that, I think he did absolutely free himself. So I think his greeting card past influenced how he saw those records. So I thought that was pretty cool. But I agree with you that the dog breath in the year of the plague, you could play that over and over again and not get tired of it, because that's just like Stan and I've been talking, there's some earworm stuff on this album, and that is definitely one of them for sure. So I have side two. So sleeping in a jar sounds a little bit like you're a lonely little girl and your mommy and your dad. It sounded like just jumped out at me. And again, that's my reference point of Rolling for the Money, that I hear that in that song. And then Mom and Dad from Rolling in for the Money. So again, he's talking about your mom and your dad are in a jar, and also Kenny's little creatures on display. So they're in a jar again. So a lot of inside jokes, we can call them, for us. And we'll never find them all, but they're there waiting for us. I think that the drumming and guitar on that song are really good. And at the end, there's a vocal chant. Now, our bizarre relationship. I am amazed as to the prevalence of the F word on this album. So I had the CD and I hear the F, and then I listen to Spotify and I hear the F word, and I get the vinyl, and I expected it to be like Rolling in It for the Money on Harry You're a Beast. They edited out all that craziness, but then when they reissued it on CD about in the 80s, they had what he was actually saying. So I think the censors were really looking at what Frank was doing. The fact that he got the F word out there, I think 5 times on this record, to me is remarkable. I do not know how that came to pass. But now the other thing that came to mind, this whole thing to me was kind of a precursor to Moon on Valley Girl. For some reason, this whole dialogue and her laughter, it just put me in mind. And, she's portraying Zappa as a sex magnet. And he had an animal magnetism with men and women. He was a puppet master. He basically made people do things they did not want to do. And he did that his whole career. And I think his whole sexuality thing is right there. And that's what this whole little number is about. Any comments on that?
You're right. I mean, what else to say? Here's the thing. He didn't make people do things they didn't want to do. He convinced people to do things on their own that they didn't want to do, which is a little bit more of a powerful persuasion I think he had. So even scarier than that.
As you were talking about that magnetism, I had this creepy feeling about Charles Manson, also a magnetic personality going in the wrong direction.
But at the Garrick Theater, sometimes when he first came there, it was Easter break, and he had like 500 people there. Then when all the kids went back to school, sometimes he only had like 3 people. So he would go sit in the audience, and that's where he really, I think, honed his ability to have that dominant stage presence like no other. I've never seen any person that had such a strong personality and was able to conduct himself admirably in a variety of scenarios, either in the Czech Republic, in Congress. The guy just had it going on so many ways. A genius. I think he's probably, you could use that word for him as much as anybody from the 20th century, without a doubt. Then track 3, the Uncle Meat variations, a lot of xylophone. And when I listened to this, the Guacamole Queen from Inca Roads, that came to mind. Same type of sound. And then there's a repetitive piano chords playing in that song. And to me, it's kind of like water torture. There's a lot of yeah at the end, and a low voice, bass voice, but very cool blues guitar playing at the end of that song with some organ that was really good. And I think that's a foreshadowing of what's to come in future records. That's probably the best guitar lick on the whole album. What do you guys think?
Yeah, it's definitely not 9 Types of Industrial Pollution.
No. Stan, any comments on that?
You know, as far as guitar playing goes, I mean, technically, I think Zappa during this period was kind of approaching the Beck Clapton Page thing as far as technical ability. He wasn't using the effects, he wasn't playing as smoothly and using distortion and stuff. It was just notes, and maybe he didn't have a lot of confidence yet. I mean, certainly by the time Zoo Dolores comes out, he's got that heavy driving metal sound, and it's just great. But if you listen to the guitar on this album too, it's quite well done. A lot of it is. Yeah.
Then we have a highlight, Electric Aunt Jemima. Again, you could put that on an endless loop, and I probably never get tired of it. I don't think that song could be released today because I think they took Aunt Jemima's picture off of the syrup and pancake mix. But I listened to it on headphones a couple times. I normally don't listen to headphones. I just crank my speakers, but it has some very nice separation on the vocals where they're coming out of both channels. And it starts off like many doo-wop songs, pretty straightforward. It sounded like there was like a bee buzzing in the background. I don't know if you guys picked up on that or not, but the earworm here is at the end, caress me, hoo ha, like it's like a huh, caress me, Aunt Jemima, caress me, caress me. That's what came to mind. I am the central scrutinizer. Zappa's doing that whispering voice from Joe's Garage. But that's a fantastic song. Really, really good. At the end, it's got some dialogue about having a hairy lip. And then, yeah, I've been lying to you the whole time. I mean, I don't know where that came from, but that was pretty cool. And then number 5, so prelude to King Kong. So it's a coming attraction for side 4. And at the end, it talks about your father's mustache, and then a bunch of different things, the yearbook and the prom queen or something. And then God Bless America. I got nothing to say about that. I really don't. I'm sure there's a reason why it's there. And then A Pound for a Brown. That's a familiar Zappa theme. There's a lot of pulsating rhythm and some nice woodwinds. And then Ian Underwood. So you're going to appreciate this, Shaggy. He was the Mother's Bob Weir. You know what I'm saying?
I'm waiting for a little more because I've mixed feelings
He
on
was
Bob Weir.
the sex magnet.
Yeah,
He was the one that
he?
go out to get all the chicks because nobody would go for the Mothers, just like nobody would go for the Grateful Dead without Bob Weir.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, he got Ruth, so.
I mean, if you see him on Rolling for the Money, I mean, he's the only normal looking guy. But now, when Zappa would interview people, he would ask what can you do besides play your instrument? Can you dance? Can you act? Can you do what I want you to do? So I'm surprised that he didn't put Ian through that procedure before he allowed him to come in. But I'm going to have some more things to say about this song, but it really is more applicable to the D side, the King Kong, because to me, what he's playing here is it's basically introducing what we're going to hear on that final side. But I've always been a fan of Ian Underwood. I love that he and Ruth were married. And unfortunately, they got divorced. But you've seen the Zappa documentary, correct? The one that, so they show Ian now. He's 83 years old. He's an old dude. And Ruth, she's probably around 80 or so. And I love the story how she got connected with Frank, how she went to the concert and said, I have to do this now. I'm not going to just play a little triangle once every 30 minutes. So there's a soft spot in my heart for both of them. So that's what I had to say about side two. What do you guys have to add?
Stan, you want to go?
Not a whole lot extra out of the four sides. I mean, I like it generally. It's probably the least eventful side. So I don't have a lot to add.
Yeah. I think it's just sort of, it's typical of every of the first three sides of Uncle Meat, a little bit of everything. Little conceptual continuity, like the last line of Uncle Meat variations, when they're doing all those just random phrases at the end, is chromium plated, which is almost a callback to chrome plated from We're Only in It for the Money. So you have that weird tie-in. And then Prelude to King Kong, I'm pretty sure that's actually a King Kong live solo. So that's interesting that he's now preluding it, even though it originally is coming from King Kong. So his use of his own previous music and repurposing it for the album again, I think is fascinating. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's other than God Bless America, which again, I think it's there for him to say, I can do this. I can just put this on an album and make you listen to it, and you're going to like it. I think that's just Frank being Frank. But yeah, that's a good.
That was from the Whiskey. And, I've been to the Whiskey many times. I saw Rory Gallagher play there. I saw Tom Petty when he had his first album out. I saw Mink DeVille there. I saw Stephen Stills, Little Feat. And I've been to the Roxy, and seeing Frank in either of those places would have been unbelievable, because I only saw him at the Palladium, at the Forum, at UC Santa Barbara, UCLA, and the Palace in Hollywood. But seeing him in a small venue, that must have just been incredible. So that's where that was from. How many times did you get to see him, Shaggy?
Oh, I never saw him.
You never saw him.
No, I got into him in like after the 84 tour. So I didn't have a chance on the 84 tour. And I would have seen him in LA in 88, but the band broke up and it looks like they will never play again. So that band broke up before they reached the West Coast. So never got to see him on that tour, but that would have been the tour.
The next best thing then is Zappa Plays Zappa. Have you seen that?
Yes, I think the next best thing is Dweezil. I don't know if you've seen Dweezil live.
Yeah, a couple times. So has Stan.
Yeah, and he has taken his guitar playing and and channeled his dad, but still has his little metal flash in there. I think Dweezil, like the first couple times I saw Dweezil, it was like, I like going because I want to hear Frank songs, but it wasn't something I don't think I would listen to on my own. But now Dweezil's playing the guitar and creating like instant compositions like Frank did that I think are on par with his dad. Yeah, Dweezil, I think is fantastic.
And that is so unbelievable that the son could approximate the greatness of the dad in that way. I mean, that's very unusual. Stan saw him do Billy the Mountain. Dweezil.
Oh, wow. I missed that tour.
Yeah, Dweezil, he's managed to surround himself with phenomenal musicians, and they do these Frank Zappa songs, and they nail them. I mean, it's just like you're there. The only thing that I find different is I play guitar, and I can tell it's not Frank playing, and Dweezil has his own, to me, a very distinctive style. It's more modern, and more metal sounding, maybe more notes. But I mean, Dweezil, Zappa playing Zappa is a good thing, and I wish they would come back out here.
Okay, you want to jump on to side 3, Stan?
Sure, yeah. So side 3 opens up with Mr. Green Jeans, which is another vegetable song. I think it follows Duke of Prunes and Call Any Vegetable. It precedes in Hot Rats, they do Son of Mr. Green Jeans, which is an extended instrumental. It's got raging guitar throughout. That's pretty happening. So, I would say that the beat, I mean, the beat comes on as sort of an ominous, heavy sax thing, and it's just plodding, okay? And it's really, the song to me is not that interesting instrumentally. There's a vibes flourish in the middle, and I have a question for you guys. I don't know the difference between a marimba and a vibe. I don't know. I don't know what I'm hearing in there, but it's one of those tinkly sounding keyboard things, and it's quite nice. I think there's virtually no sign of guitar on the album. Having said those things, it's always been one of my favorite songs. I love the vocals. I don't know what they mean. I don't know why he's singing about vegetables. In my limited research, I did find out that Frank is not the son of Mr. Green Jeans, who was Captain Kangaroo's sidekick. So that was a little bit of humor there. I mean, you got lyrics like, eat a grape, eat a fig, a crumpet too. You'll pump them right through. Do. I mean, you gotta like that stuff. I mean, it's so.
Yeah.
Mr. Green Jeans has always been one of my favorite songs, but I don't know why it exists. It's followed on side 3 by We Can Shoot You. It's this is about a 2-minute beautiful instrumental. Opens with vibes and some squeaky clarinet sounds. I think it's, as one of you mentioned, that this is the first time I think that we've heard Ruth Underwood, or whatever her name was then, coming off on an album of a Mother's album. It's a good, to me, it's the song is a good example of Frank's ability or interest in manipulating the sound and the instruments, because you have instruments speeding up and slowing down. It's not a natural flow at all, but it works in Frank's own strange way. Let's see, so We Can Shoot You. It's followed by If We'd Only Been Living in California. It's the minute-long rant, I should say, by Jimmy Carl Black. My understanding was that they were in the midst of recording, were only in it for the money, and they weren't gigging because they're in the studio. And so at one time, Jimmy Carl Black is just complaining about, hey, we're not making any money. We've only gigged one time this month, and and then Frank explains why. But Frank often recorded what people were saying, sometimes without them even knowing. He was recording all the time, things that were happening in his life and whatnot. And I saw in an interview kind of recently, Jimmy Carl Black was flabbergasted when this came out on the album. He didn't have any idea, really. It seemed like he was being recorded. He certainly didn't know that it was going to be put out on an album. So I find it really entertaining. It's again, it's only like a minute. So anyway, so that's that one is followed by The Air, which is another favorite song. And I don't really understand what this song is about. I thought it was a natural follow-up on Jimmy Carl Black's Rant, you know, because they talk about the air coming out of your mouth. You know, it's, again, I tried to do some research. I couldn't get a good handle on what these lyrics are about. The song is in two parts. He starts out, he's waking up in a Chevy in a t-shirt on a beach, and he's freezing, and he's got a girl in there apparently who is teasing, and so he hits her and he beats her and he tells her he doesn't like her. You know, that's part of the song. And then there's a little segment thereafter where he's talking about being on acid. I'm tripping and my hands are dripping, blah, blah, blah. And then it goes, and I got busted going through customs with a suitcase full of tapes. And they hit me and they beat me and they told me they don't like me. Very entertaining stuff. It probably wouldn't float in the, you know, this century, but you could say those things back in the 60s, I guess. There was some conjecture that maybe that was about the reference to some of the legal problems I think Frank had in the early 60s. He had a studio of some sort, and he made a bootleg pornography tape for an undercover police officer, for which he got busted. They confiscated a lot of his equipment and his tapes and this and that. So some people have tried, I think, to draw a connection between that experience and this song. I personally don't know. So okay. Yeah, again, I don't have much insight as to, you know, how this song evolved, but it's definitely one of my favorites. The next song is called Project X, and this thing starts out with an acoustic guitar strum. It's just a conventional strum. I mean, I thought I picked up a Peter Frampton album by accident. It's just beautiful, and it's the strumming guitar and clarinet that are coming in quite nicely done. But you get about 35 seconds into it, and then the chaotic everything but the kitchen sink Frank Zappa thing starts. You got all the instruments going. I mean, he seems like his thing is we're going to get every weird instrument we can find, and we're going to make all the weird sounds out of it, and we're going to put them all together, and you guys better understand it. But I like it. I'll tell you, I seriously like this song. This is one of the songs that I probably haven't listened to until recently, because, you know, it's not immediately accessible. It's not like that funny doo-wop song. There's even some there's some flute in it. There's some harpsichord playing. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on. It's got an improvisational feel. Becomes a little bit indulgent towards the end, but overall, I think it's just a beautiful, elegant song. And you know, I might actually listen to it when we're done here. Trying to go through my notes here. There's one more track. Cruising for Burgers. Cruising for Burgers in Daddy's New Car. The difference between us is not very far. I think the song generally, if you try and understand the lyrics or analyze them, which is probably foolhardy, it's talking about how glorious it is to have a fake ID. So I doubt that this was Frank Zappa speaking. It's not about him, but it's just, you know, there's actually some lead vocals by Frank, which is kind of rare on this album. They're kind of nice. There's some really nice silky guitar work here and there. It's kind of buried. It's not right up front, but it's beautifully done. I mean, there was some, as I think Shaggy said, there's some not so great guitar solos on the album, but this has some really neat stuff. And thereafter it just kind of drops into an orchestral type of thing. And overall, it's a good song. They're all good songs. Every single thing on here is good. So that kind of concludes side 3. That's the whole thing. What's your
Go ahead,
favorite
Shaggy.
song? What's your favorite song on side 3? Anybody?
Mine is Mr. Green Jeans. I love that. I love that opening, dun, just that ominous type march or
Yeah.
whatever it is, hands down. And yeah, I also think this is like by far the second best side on this album. As much as I love King Kong, I wish this was the 4th side. I think side 3 should have been side 4, because I think it's Frank almost being like, hey, you've made it this far. I'm going to give you Mr. Green Jeans. I'm going to give you The Air. I'm going to give you Cruising for Burgers. I'm giving these awesome pop hooks. And I'm also going to give you, like you said, the first 35 seconds of Project X. And then I'm going to remind you that, wait, I'm Frank Zappa. And the next 4.5 minutes are going to be chaos, or the next 4 minutes. So
Yeah.
like, I'm not going to let you off scotch-free. But scot-free. I wanted to add, there is, and I don't think it's on Meatlight. I think it's on the We're Only in It for the Money box set. But one of those sets has the full conversation with Zappa and Jimmy Carl Black. This is like 1 minute and 15 seconds. And at one point, Frank goes, "You don't need me. I just play guitar. You don't need me to sing. Ray can sing. Other people can sing. You can sing, Jimmy. Anytime I have a guitar solo, like you can get Ian to play a sax solo. Like he's a better player than me." Like Frank was encouraging them to go out on their own and play while he was in the studio. And Jimmy was like, they'll come see us once. And then once they realize you're not there, they're never coming back. It's you they're coming to see, Frank. It's not us. It's not the music. It's you. And Frank's like, no, no, no. And Jimmy's like, no, I promise you. So it's interesting Frank didn't put that part in, because I think it makes Frank look better. Like he wasn't preventing them from going out there and playing shows. The band was like, hey, we need you, man. Like you are the engine behind this. So that's a pretty interesting track if you go on Spotify or YouTube.
That's an important angle about Frank Zappa, because a lot of people are going to see him as being arrogant, wanting to be the spotlight, and to hear him being a little bit humble, I think that would kind of moderate things a little bit. Tony, any thoughts?
Yeah, Jimmy Carl Black. So in the movie 200 Motels, have you seen it, Shaggy? Lonesome Cowboy Burt?
Yes.
So he's complaining that he's not getting paid in that movie. And Bunk Gardner in the Zappa documentary talks about the same thing. So, in the book I'm reading, and also in this album, they were kind of shut out of California just because of all the violence going on in Sunset Boulevard, where they could not go and play. So they couldn't get any gigs. That's why what is it called? Something about California.
If we'd all been living in California.
Yeah, Zappa says if we're in California, we wouldn't get any work at all. Yeah. So at least in New York, I think they got $100,000 for that whole 6-month residency at the Garrick Theater. So Mr. Green Jeans, the baritone sax in the beginning, really, really memorable. Then in We Can Shoot You, there's a bicycle horn. I'm a big 10cc fan, and they have a song called One Night in Paris, and it starts off with the bicycle horn. So, and 10cc, I always told people that's the Beach Boys meets Frank Zappa. That's the best way, because I got into them when they first came out, and I was just a fan forever when they were first there. And then in The Air, Zappa is talking about, do you love me? Right? I love you, or whatever he says. He also
I told you that I love you.
Yeah. And then you're gonna crash in my Nash. So a lot of people don't even know what a Nash was, vehicle. But I got to tell you, Project X to me is a highlight on the album. I love that song. Yeah. It's really, really good. Very different than anything else on the whole album. And It's quite good. And yeah, it's really good. So why don't we just go ahead and get into side 4, the King Kong. I got a bunch of notes, but I'm going to hold them in reserve until you guys talk.
I got one note about the Nash. I've never seen one, but I understand that it has folding seats. So you
Oh.
can crash in your Nash.
Okay, there you go. So who wants to kick it off for side 4?
I'll go. Oh,
Go ahead. Yeah, that's
right.
great.
My favorite. This is my favorite album. I have no complaints. So I'm nitpicking at this point. When they released that Meat Life, the original sequencing of this King Kong was only the first 10 minutes, the part that's not on the flatbed truck in Miami. It was just the first 10 minutes, and it closed out side 2, side B. And I think it works. The album is even that much better when it's put there. I think the first 10 minutes of this are absolutely fantastic. I think the intro to King Kong, like when that just everything kind of rolls in and then you get the main theme, like that's exactly how he always described it live during these shows. He always had an intro where he talked about the movie King Kong, because I guess it wasn't as, a ubiquitous a part of like culture as it is now. Like we all know what King Kong is, but like in any show in the 60s when Frank played King Kong, he introduced it and he explained the story of the movie, because I'm assuming people just maybe weren't as familiar with it back then. But it really is this whole idea of like, these people coming into this strange jungle island and then discovering this massive beast. And that opening music sounds like that. It's got that rumble. It's just got that very like, I don't know, something very visceral about it. And then you get that main theme, which is like on the verge of being chaotic. And then you just get solos, which are just like, I don't know, you're off in a jungle trying to fight a beast. You're on your own. You're going to improvise. Like, I think the title works. I think the solos are fantastic. Bunk Gardner solos, especially, is absolutely amazing. I don't think you need the final 7 minutes. I think when they go to that live track at the end and we cut and the audio gets not as the sound quality is not as good, that almost seems like, hey, I still got more time. I only have 10 minutes. I need something else. If I have any complaints about this album, drop the last 7 minutes, move King Kong somewhere else, and just rework things to make it work. Other than that, I absolutely love this. But part of it feels like the way it was released, you have 3 sides, which is Uncle Meat, and then you get a bonus live 17 minutes of just awesome improvisational playing. And I think if he had put it elsewhere in the album, it's a bigger statement to make, to put King Kong in the middle of your Uncle Meat Island and to let him just tear up the scenery. And then you go back to like, oh, now we're back to like, what was the opening on side 3? Now we're back to Electric Ant Jemima or whatever that was. It's a lot like, okay, I like that. We went that. But other than that, I love side 4. I love. I could listen and then play extended horn solos forever.
Well, I need to hear it some more because, it's, use a cliche of, it's a musical journey. There's so much to digest. I think it's 18 minutes long-ish. It starts out with some beautiful contemporary jazz sounding music. It's so nice. And it kind of eventually segues into like, you almost think you're listening to an old 70s Carlos Santana jam at some point. It's to me, it's really in there. It gets a little chaotic for me in the middle. Not chaotic, but I mentioned earlier there's a sax part where there's some just repetitive notes. It just keeps going, and you would take out the last 7 minutes, Shaggy. I would take out some of that,
right?
Some of that sax part there. But to me, the song towards the end, or the side towards the end, it does resolve into some beautiful music again. And so it's good. I need to listen to this some more, and I've got it right behind me. And when we sign off, I'll probably put it on. So good stuff.
That last song, I thought it was an electric violin, but I guess it's Frank's guitar solo, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
but
I have a note that he kind of wraps things up with a solo. Yeah.
Yeah. So the other thing, the transitions between these songs, they're not there. I mean, they just flow into one another, except there's some cymbal crashing going on for
Mhm.
song 6 and song 3 that I guess signals the transition. But so I went way back on this because this is really groundbreaking. So Shaggy, you don't know, but I'm a big jazz fusion and prog rock guy. I mean, those are my two main types of music that I love because I love the virtuosity of the players, and I also like those extended solos. So I think this may be the first instance of either of those types of music because I went back. Pink Floyd had Pipers at the Gates of Dawn in 1967. It's got this song Interstellar Overdrive that's kind of the one of the first prog rock songs. And then Soft Machine also has an album from 68. But then in jazz fusion, so Stan and I are big Larry Coryell fans on guitar. He had a jazz fusion album in 67. And Downbeat started to talk about rock music in 67. So this is about the same time that Frank was recording this. So the jazz world was starting to recognize rock music as having something to contribute. Miles Davis in 1968 in his autobiography, he said we started to listen to Jimi Hendrix, James Brown, Sly and the Family Stone, which introduced um, that element in his music. And then we had Bitches Brew, and In a Silent Way in 69. But this predates those records. So it's really, I think, a seminal recording. But in terms of the saxophone playing, we got to go back to Ornette Coleman, 1961. He had an album that only had one song per side. And then also Pharoah Sanders was another one, 64. We have Eric Dolphy, who played with Ornette Coleman, is playing bass clarinet. And then we know Eric Dolphy's Memorial Barbecue, which is listed in the liner notes for Freak Out. And so he was an influence on Frank. And we also had Russia and Roland Kirk. So these guys, they were doing that crazy sax playing that we hear here. They were doing it before, but
Sure.
never in a rock type of idiom. So I think that's people that like that sort of thing. Yeah. So the Ornette Coleman album 61 was called Free Jazz. So if you listen to that and you listen to this, you're going to pick up a lot. But the thing that is missing for me, I think that the virtuosity that you would find in Mahavishnu Orchestra, Return to Forever, you're not hearing that in the drumming. But it's not a criticism. It was just early, and it still was to be developed. But I think that it's funny. Mahavishnu and the mothers, they played together, and Mahavishnu opened, and when the mothers saw that, they were intimidated, like, uh-oh, we can't hold a candle to these guys. But again, I don't think that that's a bad thing. Um, but in the documentary, the Zappa documentary, it talks about how Zappa decided to break up the mothers. You guys may remember that. And that was really traumatic, but he had to move on because one of the things that Stan and I have talked about, and I think Frank's talks about it, he gets the best players to play the type of music that he's doing at the moment. And those guys just couldn't do it. And I think the people that he had, how many people have been in his band? probably 100, right? Any idea?
Nope, it's a lot.
At least 50.
Yeah,
Um,
at least 50, by like 75, probably
yeah,
50.
and none of them were slouches. Um, but you couldn't use drugs, right?
Yeah, Lowell George got kicked out because either drugs or
Yes.
there's two stories. He was doing drugs too much, or Frank respected his talent so much he encouraged him to go out on his own. So
Okay.
there's different stories about that.
And
There was a
here's
story.
here's something else to talk about on side 4. How much of this is improvised and how much of it is scored? I don't know, because
Yeah,
Frank wanted you to play what he wrote, and that was it.
Yeah.
Any ideas?
I think all the sax solos are legitimately sax solos, and the little Don Preston thing in the very beginning of track 1, that's Preston improvising.
Okay.
Like when he gave you room, that was your room to do whatever you wanted. Yeah. So other than like the themes, which are obvious what the themes are because you got everybody playing together, those were scored, but the solos are solos. Though Frank may have been conducting the band at some point, he did give cues like, either faster or slower things, but how you interpreted those cues was up to you. Frank just wanted you to, hey, now do something that represents this with my hand, but you're doing it however you interpret that. So a little bit of control, but he did give some freedom to his
A
players.
couple other things. So on Super Session, Al Cooper, Mike Bloomfield, Stephen Stills, there's a song called His Holy Modal Majesty. And Al Cooper is playing this crazy keyboard instrument that would have been right at home on this album. That's from 68. And then before that was East West by the Butterfield Blues Band. And that was 66. If you go and listen to that, you're going to hear similar music to this. So there were other people doing similar stuff that may have influenced Frank, maybe not. But, to me, I think his Edgar Varese stuff, his doo-wop stuff, the time that he spent in playing in little bands in his studio. The other thing about him that we haven't really talked about, he was addicted to editing. That was his thing. That got him high, just doing editing, and he loved it. And that's obvious. There's so much editing on this album in terms of speeding up, playing through different devices, and just the sequencing. So he was that was his thing. So pretty cool.
I'd like to give a shout out to the Grateful Dead, who are also starting to explore those sort of jazzier improv territories in 67, 68. Viola Lee Blues, songs like Caution. Dark Star, which became ultimately their magnum opus of improv, was not fully developed, but they were already really going out there to those places that like represented nothing anybody else was doing, and that was a West Coast band too. So there had to be a lot of that in the scene that Frank was aware of, because we know he paid attention, even though he acts like he didn't. He did.
Did you get into the Grateful Dead before Zappa?
Yes. Yeah, I'm a Deadhead more than I'm a Zappa head, and I'm a huge Zappa head, but I'm a Deadhead way more. Yeah. I saw them.
I met a guy. This guy actually used to live in Fountain Valley. He lived by Ellis Park. I didn't meet him until we both moved to Georgia, and he was a Deadhead. He traveled with the band.
I did that too. Yeah.
Acid. I mean, but that was the only band that he liked. He didn't like anybody else. Have you found that to be the case? A lot of the Deadheads, they are just not open to anything else.
Yeah, I mean, but it's like with any other band. I mean, if you go see Tool and you dare complain about Tool or think other, but yeah, I mean, but yeah, with the Deadhead, there's a large proportion of people who are just either just about Dead or they're just about the Dead and Fish. And yeah, there's that insular, like if it's not jam band music, it doesn't matter. But yeah, and that kind of stuff turns me off. But luckily, I found a whole bunch of Deadheads who loved other types of music, and those were the people I went to shows with. So I had a good circle. So
I've never seen them in concert, and I'm not a Deadhead. To me, I think for me, their music is too meandering, but that is probably a superficial observation because I haven't really gotten into it that deeply. But I think that there's got to be something to them. Otherwise, they would not have the longevity that they've had.
Yeah, there's a lot to them, and especially as a jazz player, like Jerry Garcia as a guitar player, sounds like nobody else. His guitar playing sounds like, there's nobody that sounds like Jerry, and he has a lot of jazz influence. There are some really healthy jams from like the late 70s where they're dropping into very distinctive like Love Supreme vibes, and if not directly referencing Love Supreme, and even like the 80s. Marcellus played with them. They had other jazz players sit in. There's definitely a lot of jazz influence in their music. And it is meandering, but I think if you come from the jazz world, you're going to understand that it's not meandering. It's just so, the rhythms they're working with, and sort of the sonic environment might sound purposeless, but the more you listen to music and know other kinds of music, the more I think you can really appreciate how they were constantly pushing the envelope as far as like improvisational music goes. And the bass player and Jerry Garcia, nobody sounds like them at all anywhere in music.
Is Phil Lesh still alive?
Phil Lesh is still alive.
Okay.
So yeah. And I have fantastic. Nobody sounds like that man as a bass. That man did not play normal bass parts. Like his bass parts are like narratives. Over the course of a 6-minute song, if you want to understand what he's playing, you got to look at the whole picture because he's not playing in like small little repetitive little fragments. That dude is a mad genius as far as bass goes.
Going back to some of the comments, one person said that Uncle Meat should have been called Freak Out because if you compare its groundbreaking characteristics to the album Freak Out, there's a lot more going on with Uncle Meat than that first album. What do you think?
I have a theory on that. So if you listen to Freak Out, it starts off normal. And as you go on through the sides, it gets progressively stranger and stranger and stranger until the last track is literally a bunch of random people making noise in an empty warehouse. And then there's like 4 minutes of Frank editing for the purpose of just editing for like 4 minutes. And so to me, the title feels like what his interpretation of suburban, like, everything he was attacking was like, you start off here, suburbia with a white picket fence and a 9-to-5 job and a housewife and your job in City Hall. But this is where it's going to take you to utter madness, which is how the album proceeds and unwinds. So I think he knew what he was doing. And I always think like, yeah, listen to the first 2 sides. Those are easy, but listen to the second 2 sides. You're going to lose your mind, man. So yeah, but both make sense. 100%. But what's a freakier name than Uncle Meat? Uncle Meat's one of the most disturbing names for an album ever.
And the cover too.
Exactly. The cover. There's nothing comfortable about this image in any way, shape, or form.
When I used to have a party and I wanted people to leave, I would put on Who Are the Brain Police?
Yeah.
And then if that didn't work, then I would put on the chrome-plated Megaphone of Destiny, and that would usually do the trick. But so Stan, you got anything to share? Any parting comments?
Well, you guys are talking about Freak Out. I mean, to me, that album is perfectly named. I'm not sure when it was recorded, maybe 66?
66.
66. Talking about freaking people out, the stuff on that album it freaks me out now. I mean, I'm sure back in 66, it was pretty groundbreaking. I would say it's more of a freak out than Uncle Meat. So in general, about what we've done today, as I said earlier, it's been really important for me to be able to take a deep dive into a Frank Zappa album as complex as this. I mean, you can listen to Zoot Allures and all that stuff, or Shake Your Booty. To me, that's a little more superficial. It's easier to get your head wrapped around it, but you have to pay attention. You have to really love music to appreciate Uncle Meat, and it's been a great thing. I think we should do a bunch of these Frank Zappa, these more obscure, indulgent sounding indulgence not the right word. I think he was just a virtuoso. And that's how it came out. But I think we should keep doing this because it's makes me feel good to understand the music. I mean, I always thought over the years I'm somewhat of a Zappa expert. I've got all the albums, but I don't know if I've really listened to them deeply enough. So it's a good thing for me.
The thing about Uncle Meat had really big sales, but I don't know how many people actually listened to the album. That would be a curious thing to look into. I wanted to mention something too, that I bought this.
If you want to read another book after Electric Don Quixote, The Negative Dialectics of Poodle Play by
Okay.
Ben Watson is by far the most scholarly, in-depth, music theory based. It might even be his thesis at some point in some college. I don't know. But then it is dense. It is not full of like light groupie stories or anything like that. But it is an absolutely amazing read.
The
Who's the
Negative
author?
Dialectics of Poodle Play.
Yeah, Ben Watson is the author.
Is it about Zappa?
I think it's called Frank Zappa, The Negative Dialectics of Poodle Play. And there's a poodle on the cover.
Was it somebody's dissertation?
I don't know. It reads like it could be. I mean, but it is. It's for this. It's not you're like, hey, I want to hear about his groupies in the 60s. No, that's not this book. This is the book if you want to know about his music and how he composed songs and you want to get in the weeds about stuff like that. So
when I was getting my my first COVID vaccination at Kennesaw State, where I'm a professor, there was another guy in there, and I overheard him talking about he was a music professor, and they were going to put on a concert, and they were going to stream it virtually because everybody's locked down. And so I just asked him, well, what do you think about Frank Zappa's orchestral compositions? And he was extremely complimentary. And it was really nice to hear because here's a guy who knows what he's talking. Well, he knew what he was talking about. A lot of college music professors don't. I was listening to Frank talk about that on that Zappa documentary about how they should become real estate agents because they're not going to make any money or something. But and then you may have heard when the London Symphony Orchestra played his stuff, Frank said they only got about 75% right. I guess they didn't rehearse enough to play it correctly. They didn't want to spend the money. And Frank just said, I wanted them to do it so I could listen to the recording for me. So you got to love that. I mean, the guy, I think he had so much integrity about what he did. There was no deceit or any falseness about him. Zero. The guy was completely sold out to what he wanted to do. And I don't think there's been anybody in the 20th century that has been as prolific as him in terms of composing recorded music. I don't think there's anybody. Can you think of anybody?
Neil Young would be the only one that I think would come to mind at this point, but he's had an extra, 30 years to do it. So
maybe Duke Ellington. I don't know how many pieces he did, but he did quite a bit for a long time.
Miles Davis was pretty prolific, but I'm not sure as much as Frank.
Well, Frank averaged like 2.5 recordings a year during his lifetime. That's pretty amazing. And if you look at the diversity of the music, there's nobody that can touch him in terms of the diversity.
This is completely in a whole different realm, but Buckethead. There is a guitar player named Buckethead who I don't even think he actually writes songs. What he literally does is he puts out dozens of albums a year because he pretty much plays by himself. He uses a drum machine. But what he'll do is come up with a drum track. He'll write a main theme. He'll solo for 5 minutes. He'll return to the theme. He'll commit it to tape once, do 12 of those, release it as an album. So, like, obviously, we're not talking about the same level of composition and stuff, but as far as releasing material, that man is a beast. And there's another band called Guided by Voices, which is like an indie rock band. They've also released one guy, Robert Pollard. He's released probably as many albums, like just way too many albums for you to like ever wrap your head around. But they're not on the artistic level of Frank, nor are they accomplishing what he accomplished with the musicians he does it with and that high quality level.
So you seem to be pretty current. You just did a video on 2022 recordings. I am not current at all. My listening time is really at a premium, and there's such a wide variety of things from the 50s through the 80s that I'm never going to run out. And so I have a bias against more recently recorded stuff because I don't think there's anything original. I think a lot of it is a synthesis of what's gone down before. And I don't really see anything that's worthy of my listening. Am I off base, or what can you say about that?
I personally think music nowadays is as exciting as it ever was.
Really?
Yeah, a lot of, I mean, it's just like, you know, a lot of stuff from the 70s, you know, Led Zeppelin is a synthesis of, you know, blues. You know, you're just adding a rock flavor to it. And I think the best artists these days are aware of what came before them. So when they're synthesizing their sounds, they're like doing it in a way that, you know, we acknowledge that this has existed for decades, but we're doing something new with it. I really like heavy metal. I'm hardcore into metal. I think the metal scene and the psych rock scene, like that noisier guitar element of modern music, is going places that metal has never gone ever, you know, since like Black Sabbath first appeared on the scene. So I think there are genres that are definitely out there. And there's a lot of really good jazz out there now too. I mean, there's a lot of really good up and coming jazz artists who are doing stuff with electronic music, you know, doing stuff with like sort of different, you know, instruments that weren't available. But it's still at the core, like pure acoustic jazz at the core, either like a piano player or a bass player or a saxophone player. But no, yeah, no, I still think there's an exhausting amount of still really good music being made.
So how do you discover this stuff?
I read all the music magazines and like, I mean, like I wake up in the morning, I drink my coffee and I have like 5 online sites. I'm like, okay, what was released today? If it's a metal album, I'm going to check it out, you know,
Gotcha.
And then so I put an effort into finding these things. Like I'm trying to actively seeking out this music.
So I subscribe to a magazine called Prog. It's from the UK.
I know that. Yeah, I know that.
And
yeah.
I'm telling you that, so in that genre, for me, yes, Genesis, and Emerson, Lake and Palmer, they kind of defined that type of music in the early 70s. Jethro Tull, you could put them in there. And what happened is when punk came along, those guys, they were criticized as being obsolete. So a lot of them changed, and a lot of people were bitter. So there was this whole neo prog thing that came along, primarily in Europe and England in the early 80s. And that's been going on even to this day, where there are hundreds of prog bands out there. I don't even know any of them. And that's just an example of how something has proliferated. And I have bought some of their stuff, and it's pretty good. But I don't know if it's good enough, because I always like to go back to the people that were there in the beginning and stay with that. But it's time consuming. Like what I do is at the end of the Prog magazine, they have all these reviews. I'll go into Spotify and I'll just sample their recordings, and it's pretty good. But you only have so much time, and I have to keep a balance. So it's tough. Stan, I know that you're into some recent music as well, right?
Yeah, I'm also constantly looking at publications, and you know, when there's a new hot artist, I mean, I'm gonna go check it out. You can always find snippets here and there. And I'm probably a hybrid of you two guys. I mean, I listen to the older stuff and the new stuff. You know, I often go to see shows with other guitar players, and we'll walk out of the show going, God damn, man, that was good, you know. And inevitably one of us will say, you know, I can do everything that guy can do. I can't do it as well. So I mean, to the new artists these days, their level of proficiency, I think, is higher. But as you were saying, it's derived from what's come before. So there's nothing more exciting to me than discovering a new artist. Listening to a guitar player now named Mike Dawes just blows my mind. I can't believe how good he is. I know everything that he's doing, but I could never play like that. So that's like the peak of excitement to me, is to find a new artist. So
You know, it'd be fun to do, and maybe Shaggy, you could take the lead on this, is maybe you could recommend something that you think would be of interest for Stan and I, and we could listen to it and we can do another program and you could pretty much facilitate the discussion on it. I think that would be a lot of fun. And would you be interested in doing that?
Yeah, I'm always interested in turning people on to new music. As far as the guitar playing you do like, just because somebody I was thinking of, what is the style? Do you have a particular guitar style you enjoy more than others, or is it just really good guitar players?
I listen to everything, so it's just it just has to be good. It has to have some quality that grabs me. So
Have you heard of a band called Earthless?
I have not. No.
Okay, so their guitar
Earthless?
player, Earthless, less like no earth. Their guitar player, Isaiah Mitchell. They're essentially, they do these really long 10, 15 minutes, sometime 20-minute instrumentals that are pretty much just, they'll set up a theme and then he solo. They're kind of like similar to like Son of Mr. Green Jeans, or similar to like a guitar solo on like Willie the Pimp. Just these really long, epic, kind of based in blues a little bit, but sometimes they go out there, sometimes it gets proggy, and he still tours. They're still out there playing. We saw them a couple of years ago. Fantastic, just straight ahead, no nonsense guitar playing. And I would recommend that. Not much to talk about over the course of a video, so I wouldn't recommend it for that, but I would check it out. Earthless is a fantastic band.
Yeah,
fantastic.
I will. Thanks.
So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up because I need to go out and get some dinner here because it's almost 20 to 8. We're going to grab some Chinese food. Shaggy, I want to make this video available for you to put on your channel if you want. I'm recording this on Zoom, and what I typically do is I'm going to upload it to my YouTube channel. Is there a way for you to get it, to put it on your channel if you want?
Probably. I guess maybe you have my email. So once you get it done, we'll email and we'll figure it out. I think if you, you have a Google, was your a Gmail?
Yes.
Because you can upload Gmails to a drive and then you can just share with me so I have access to it and then I can download it and take it.
Okay, if you want, I want to make it available. Okay, well, I hope you guys had a good time. I learned a lot and it was fun. And maybe we could do this maybe like once a month. I know, Shaggy, you usually do what, three videos a week or so?
Yeah, I usually get a couple in. Yeah, at least I try to get 3 in. So yeah.
Yeah, and this is new for me. I've only been doing this for a month, but what I tell my friends, and you may be able to do it as well. In the past, we used to be able to get together and crank up our stereo and talk about what we're listening to while we're in the same room, and that was really fun. That ship has sailed for most of us, and I don't have anybody to listen to music with at all, zero. And so to me, this is a great outlet because I'm able to recapture something that I enjoyed from the past and also learn. So I hope I can continue to do this. And you've been a great great friend. The fact that we're from the same stomping grounds, I think. I don't know if you believe in Kismet or not, but I think that this is something that we could probably do for a while and really enjoy it. And
Yeah.
can be a beneficial experience.
I'm here. I enjoyed this. So yeah, I would love to do it. I'm always up for talking about music, listening to music,
All right,
100%.
good. Okay, guys. Well, look, I'm going to go ahead and stop this. And I hope you have a great rest of your evening and a good Sunday.
All right.
All
Thank
right.
you. Nice to meet you,
Talk
Stan.
with you later.
Likewise, Shaggy.
Again. All right. Take
Have a
care.
good night.
You too. Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye, Internet.
See you later.